As we are diving into this, spawning in the top left-hand corner of Neo Humanity, we have the Canadian Protoss player representing Team Basilisk. It is Trigger. And spawning in the bottom right-hand corner, we have his opponent. We have the South Korean Zerg player representing On-Side Gaming. It is Solar. We have seen these two players face off in ESL Cup Americas in the past, in the lead up to this tournament, and typically Solar has been looking a little bit more on top. What I would say is that in current era, Trigger, I think his best matchup is probably PVT. Like, his PVT is very impressive. He can go toe-to-toe with the best of the best in Korea with his Protoss versus Terran. Against Zerg, I do think that this is a matchup that Trigger is still refining. I still think that this is probably one of his weaker, or if not his weakest matchup. But, of course, how best to work on that matchup than here at an offline event against a player like Solar. So now he's going for a bit of a scout. Solar is going to be taking that center base with the Rich Vespene Gas Geyser. Very cheeky base here out of Solar. You don't see this often anymore, as Trigger has no idea which base was taken. He gets confirmation, of course, that it was a hatch gas pool. But Trigger, I think, is just assuming that the triangular third was taken. So I'm sure he's going to be just double checking as the probe does escape. But yeah, taking the center base was really trendy at the start of the year, when the map pool was kind of fresh, especially post Katowice. We saw Raynor, we saw Cyril, Dark, anyone when it comes to the Zerg players, we're going for the center base and going for these big Queen Roach all-ins on Neo Humanity. And then it kind of fell off. It fell off because Protoss players, they got better and better at defending against it. Like Hero, Classic, Max Packs, they all got very well versed with defending against these all-ins. Especially here at the third base location. And I shouldn't be getting ahead of myself, just because Solar took the center base doesn't mean he's setting up for an all-in. But, it is just reminding me of that just because of how popular and how common that was a couple of months ago. Of course, the reason for that is with this base, you get the Rich Vespene Gas Geyser, which does help with roach production. Taking this base also allows you to kind of launch pad your creep forward and just spread very quickly across the map to the opponent's side as well, to help with queen walks, to help with pushes overall. So this does allow that to be a possibility here for Solar, as the Adept does arrive and does get a drone. And could get another drone as well. This is the difficult thing about expanding here, is that you can attack from the other side of these destructible towers. Trigger doing a great job at abusing this location. Very nicely done. Can we get another drone? For now, we get 2 workers. We force more links out of Solar. Force the Queen to go off creep and just run around for a moment. And back at home, it is a Stargate opener for Trigger. So a very standard opener from our Protoss player. And again, he's doing a great job at just being a nuisance here, forcing so much lost mining time at this natural base. As he does a dip back in and gets another drone. Solar being punished, but link speed kicks in, and finally Solar is going to clean up these Adepts. But as they get cleaned up, the Oracle dives in. There is no Spore in position, but there are 2 Queens. Clutch transfuse. As Solar holds onto his mineral line across the map, Links are going for a counterattack. The natural base, there is a wall, but the third is a little bit more exposed. Ooh, the Adepts were sent earlier. They're not at home. But the Oracle shows up in time. Trigger does defend. We have 2 Twilight Councils on the way. One of these is supposed to be a forge. Hopefully we realize that in time and we cancel it. But this is, I'm pretty sure this is not intentional from Trigger. So a little bit of a slip up, maybe a little bit nervous. Again, similar to Fiant, Trigger isn't the most experienced when it comes to offline play. He's also a player that rose up in the COVID era of StarCraft. Both Twilight Councils do finish. Blink is started. And do we throw down the Forge? As Because of this, we are going to be missing our +1 and blink timing, as again, typically we would have a forge to work on our upgrades alongside this. The Oracle's still sharking around looking for damage, don't quite find anything. I appreciate the Trigger is making use of it. We have blink and charge on the way. You know, if life gives you lemons, make some lemonade. Now, I haven't had some good lemonade in a long time. It's been a hot minute. Oh, ooh. The pylon is also misplaced here. Because of that, a couple of probes actually can't mine. This is blocking some mineral patches, or just, yeah, making it really awkward here. I don't think that's intentional either. Okay, get back to work. Get back to work. Oh, actually, no, never mind. Sorry. I think this does make it more efficient to mine from these two. They were just idle, I think. And it's something weird that I just noticed. As the Lynx have arrived and are going to be swatted away for the time being. Solar is working on that crease spread. Roaches are on the way. We have a mass amount of Lynx out in the field, and blink isn't done. We do catch some Stalkers. Very big pickups here for Solar. Is that more efficient? It isn't, because this probe has to go all the way around it. Yeah. It happens. it happens, Bobby. It happens. Solar, he's just keeping his opponent busy back at home. We do have a Dropper Lord being set up here on the left hand side. I appreciate to see it. You don't get to see Dropper Lord harassed too often in this matchup. Is getting ready to go into the main base. Likewise, back at home, the Roach army is just building up. And Trigger is getting ready for his own attack. Now, how many gateways do we have? Okay, this is going to be a 3-base all-in. Trigger, he has, I believe, 9 gateways in total. About to be 10. Usually this hits with +1, but this is going to be hitting with charge instead. Interesting. Zealots are going to be cleaned up. The Stalkers having a hard time pushing forward. They do take down the Queen. But alas, there are just so many Roaches available. Again, that Rich Vesting Gas guys are really kicking in. And Solar is knocking this back. At the same time, the Dropper Lord is dipping into the main. Behind this, there's no additional gas guys. This is no forge, there's no +1. There is nothing else with this. Thankfully, it looks like Trigger does have some Zealots in the main base. But we have more Lynx coming into the natural. 10 workers are going down. And especially when you're all in, you can't afford to lose workers. Like, you need to have a good enough economy to sustain all of your production, to sustain your 10 gateways. And alas, Solar is just knocking the army all the way back to that proxy gate. Queens push on forward. There's just too much Roach Ravager. And Solar completely shuts this down. And again, Trigger just doesn't have another way to transition out of this. There's no upgrades, there's no additional tech, no Temple Archives or Robotic Spade. As Solar, with all that momentum, is just pushing, bullying Trigger all the way back to his own side of the map. To his own bases. Trigger was at least able to clean up all those Lynx that were disrupting his economy earlier. But there's nothing else left. GG gets called, and Solar takes game number 1. GG. Solid game there out of Solar, but it was a little bit back and forth, a little bit more back and forth. I was definitely appreciating how Trigger was able to punish that center base and really make Solar work for actually taking control of that hatchery. So it was definitely a good start, but afterwards, yeah, we saw that things were looking a little bit awkward for Trigger, and Solar was able to get map control. The Oracles also weren't able to do too much damage. The Queen movement and positioning from Solar was pretty impressive, and he didn't really lose too many workers at all to Trigger, outside of the initial Adept harass, of course. GG, well played. With that, Solar has a lead in the series, but Trigger can still bring it back as we get into game number 2. What's happening in the chat? Oh, a gaggle of geese. What do I do if light gives me lemons? You rub it on his... You need to calm down, okay? Ay, ay, ay. You all do, Noam Chomsky. You all do. As we're diving into our next game and spawning in the top right-hand corner, we have the Canadian Protoss player representing Team Basilisk. It is Trigger. And spawning in the bottom left-hand corner, we have as opponent, we have the South Korean Zerg player representing Onside Gaming. It is Solar. Again, after seeing that last game, I'm very curious if the double Twilight Council was intentional or not. The reason why I bring that up is when you go for a 3-base all-in with 10 gateways, the way that Trigger did, you also don't get +1 with it. Ideally, you want to hit faster with more units, so you still don't get a forge anyway. So I wonder if intentionally that was a second Twilight Council, or if because he had a second Twilight Council, because he didn't have a forge, he decided to go for the 3-base all-in to try to make use of that timing with blink and charge. So I wonder if that was like, if Trigger came up with that on the fly, or if that was predetermined and like premeditated. Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious, as we do see Solo going for a hatch gas pool. Again, we're on Altitude, the largest map in the map pool. I was afraid we weren't going to see this map today, but thankfully I'm pleasantly surprised. We are on Altitude, a map that is quite large in nature. Because that there are a lot of bases to be taken, we can try to cut the map in half. We can try to force the late game. I say try because even though the map is large and even though we have a lot of bases, it's very spread out. There are a lot of attack paths available as well, and as a result, we have seen games end a little bit prematurely as well. This isn't like Neo Humanity, where you can just turtle up very easily, or I say very easily, you can turtle up with relative ease and be very defensive. We'll see. As for now, is going to be another Stargate opener coming out from Trigger. So everything's looking normal, everything is looking standard. Likewise across the map, Solo just going for a hatch gas pool, saturating his natural and going for his third as he swats away those probes. So far, so good. So far, everything is very economic, very standard. Papi. And yeah, I guess my eyes are on Trigger. What I will say is that the overall strategy that Trigger went for in the previous game isn't going to be taking place here. Not the best map for a 3-base all-in. Again, the map itself is in a way working against you when you go for some play like that. So I expect to see something different. Something that I'm concerned about, but it does happen, is Skytoss. We have seen a lot of players like Hero, like Classic, even Creator at times just work on 4 bases, and once they get their 4 bases up and running, they throw down a second Stargate, a Fleet Beacon, and they start transitioning into carriers. Is something we have seen quite a bit of on Altitude. So something to bear in mind. Till then, first Oracle is going across the map. We do have 2 Queens in the natural, 2 Queens in the main, and nothing to protect at the 3rd base. So far, so good here for Solar. He does have your pretty standard setup to defend against your initial Oracle. And Trigger is expanding back at home. First Oracle rocks up, but the Queens are in position. Up. Despite that, we still get 1 drone, but oh, we're taking a lot of hits for it. A lot of hull damage was done to that first Oracle. Meanwhile, the second one gets into the 3rd base, and we do find some drones. Not too bad. 2 workers will go down. The A move! Up! Ugh. Yeah, a little bit of miscontrol there from Trigger. Does accidentally attack that that hatchery, and as a result takes a little bit of damage. At the same time, Lings go for a counterattack. One of the Adepts does get caught out. The Adept and a Probe do go down. Not much else though. Solar has to back off. So you see Trigger looking for more damage. Does find another drone. 4 in total. Oh no! As he does fly too close to the sun, does get burned, and one of the oracles does go down. Oof. Again, unfortunate pathing there for Trigger, as he is down to 2 oracles. Of course, 2 oracles can still one-shot workers, but upon losing one of them, it does mean that Solar has so much less to worry about. Oh, we can see him setting up here with his queens, trying to flank these oracles. Oh! Let's get a couple of hits in back at home. We see Trigger transitioning. He's going for his Twilight Council and his Forge this time, going for his Blink and +1 timing. Has to be expected. Third base, we did see one probe going down earlier, but for the most part, Trigger is able to get this saturated without too much issue. Without too much troubles. As he's moving out, we see our Templar Archives on the way, so Trigger is going to be refining this army, looking to invest into Archons. Maybe even Storm. He's got options. Oh, even going for a second Forge for 1-1. Okay, so very tech heavy here for Trigger. He's going to be investing a lot in his army, in his upgrades. Meanwhile, back at home, Solar, he's actually been able to drone up quite happily. Because of his Oracle defense, he hasn't really lost too much. I may have spoken too soon. This 4th base is looking a little bit exposed. But Solar has been able to get up to 70 workers, and now he can focus on amassing just Lings and Roaches. Here are the Oracles. They do dip in. 3 drones go down here at the 4th base. Very nicely done. But again, Solar is just focusing on producing army. And here we go. Roaches are being sent out across the map. We do see a transition back at home, actually. Solar is throwing down a Hydroden and Infestation Pit. So it looks like he's feigning aggression. Oh, he could lose the Queen here if he's not too careful. The Queen is saved. Yeah, upon seeing this defensive position, it looks like Solar, he wants none of that. Is going to be backing up. At the same time, it looks like Trigger has eyes on the drone count of his opponent. Recognizes that Solar is saturating his 4th base. And likewise, Trigger is getting ready for the next step. He's expanding, taking a 4th. He's going to be bleeding out some Stalkers, though. Less than ideal. 4th base is on the way, but Lings are here to look to deny it. Uh-oh. It does force a cancel on the 4th base. Solar making a lot happen with a little. Bearing in mind that Solar, he hasn't been producing too many Roaches. He is working towards Lurker tech. Overseer is diving into the main, getting eyes on any kind of Sky Toss transition. Roaches turn back around. The Lings, they get on top of the High Templar. They force an Archon. There's still plenty of High Templar left, though. Trigger will be taking a decent fight, but he still lost his 4th. Meanwhile, Solar is working on his Hive, working on those Lurker upgrades eventually. And Trigger's just kind of poking and prodding, but he can't quite commit to anything. He doesn't have the army supply to do so. Again, a big reason for that is because of how delayed his 4th base is. So Trigger is forced to back off, stay at home, and this allows Solar to tech up, work on his Hive upgrades for those Lurkers. Hydra upgrades as well, and there it is. 9 Lurkers are on the way. And suddenly Trigger, he's missing his timing. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to scout either, so he doesn't know what kind of army he's up against. Otherwise, he would be transitioning into Skytoss. We'd be seeing the Fleet Beacon, we'd be seeing more Stargates, even Disruptors. Trigger just is unaware. Meanwhile, back at home, Nidus is on the way. We have an Overseer in between the bases looking for a Nidus. We're going to throw one down, I should say. Roaches are distracting the main army. Nidus is on the way in the natural. Trigger is collapsing on these Roaches. Really good trades coming out from Trigger. But there's no reaction. There's no reaction, no! Nidus is going to finish. It looks like Trigger may be forced to go into a base trade. He's not turning back around. What do we have at home defense? Do we have any lurkers ready? Oh, the lurkers, they finish just in time. The base is going to go down. Speaking of, natural base has also fallen, and we can see Trigger just diving into the main as well. Charge is not done. Slow lots are going to be going down. Meanwhile, across the map, it looks like we're gaining ground. Trigger, he gets on top of the queens, but he doesn't have detection. He does not have detection. As the lurkers waddle into the main base. Lings are coming in to reinforce. Oracle's doing what it can. At the same time, Trigger is looking for a way in, but he just can't push into these lurkers. There's no way. Oh, there's no way he can. The High Templar, no! High Templar are going to be going down as well. Trigger does find another hatchery, but his main base is compromised, and he has no answers to lurkers. Does get a snipe on the base itself. Is forced to be recalled, but he's recalling into lurkers. No. The Oracle doesn't have energy for Revelation. GG gets called, and Solar will take the series 2-0. GG. GG, well played. Again, a really awkward scenario for Trigger, just because he didn't see the Hive Tech and he didn't see the Lurker Den. If he was aware of them, then he would have been working on not just more detection, but he would have been refining his army, either working on Disruptors as a bit of a stopgap, or working on a Skytoss transition as well. Especially after getting his 4th base up and running, he did have the money for that sort of thing. He just needed to recognize what exactly was happening, whether it's scouting with oracles or with hallucinations or with observers, in some way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, Trigger, he just didn't quite know what Solar was doing, know that he was, taking up even further away from Lingbane Roach Ravager. Fun fact, something that I found really interesting was that Solar, he actually didn't morph in any Ravagers or Banelings at all that game. He had the tech for it, but he never invested into them. As soon as he saw that Trigger was taking a 4th base, that was the cue. That was the tell for Solar to like, okay, I'm gonna work on my Hive. I'm gonna work on a Hydra Den. I'm gonna just skip ahead in tech here. I know that I'm not gonna like waste any time here in the mid game with like Ravagers and Banelings. I'm going for the kill move instead. Really, really interesting stuff out of Solar. Cool. And with that, he does take the 2-0. And we're gonna be getting into our next series. We're going back to the young up-and-comer. It's gonna be Skillous versus Fiant. I'm excited.